Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the Wealth Café. We are joined for an incredible conversation with Stephanie Bray, who is Arizona's leading luxury real estate agent and strategist and founding agent of Serhant in Arizona, a move that she initiated by personally pitching Ryan Serhant himself, a story we are going to dive into today. And she has over 150 million in sales over the past 5 years. Stephanie is known for her bold vision, high impact marketing, and ability to turn real estate into a wealth building strategy. She specializes in guiding high net worth clients, particularly physicians relocating to Arizona, through a seamless high stakes transaction. Whether it's luxury listings, investment moves, or cross state relocations, Stephanie brings a blend of strategy, storytelling, and relentless drive that redefines what it means to lead in modern real estate. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. What a very kind introduction.
I love it. You have such an incredible story of how you got into real estate, and I'd love for you to share a little bit of your background because not only are you a real estate agent, but if I'm right, you are a third generation agent. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. So I really grew up in the business. And when people ask me how long I've been in the business, I say my whole life. And I actually really mean that. My both of my parents worked in the real estate business. And I grew up going to showings and open houses with my mom. So even from the time that I was a kid, I was selling real estate and knew what an escrow meant.
That is so funny. So, what was it that made you say, okay, I want to do this as well? I'm going to continue on rather than people go one of two ways, right? They either think, no, I never want to do this, or they get the bug. What was that moment for you where you got the bug?
I love that question. So I got my real estate license when I was 18, and at that time, I was like the first category you mentioned. Absolutely not. No way am I selling real estate. That's what my parents do. When you're 18, you know everything, and I was no exemption from that. I definitely knew everything, and that I wasn't going to sell real estate. And so I ended up going to college and got a couple of degrees, and I went into consulting actually in Los Angeles, and it had nothing to do with real estate whatsoever. But when I was 22, I ended up in the emergency room actually because I was having an ocular migraine and I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I knew that I couldn't see. And so it was super scary. And basically, I was like, why am I dying? I'm only 22 years old. I was having this migraine from staring at a computer for, 15, 16 hours every single day. And it was kind of that moment that made me realize, like, do I really want to work like this? I'm the type of person that's going to work that hard no matter what, but do I really want to work like that for someone else's dream, or do I want to work that hard for myself and my family and my legacy? And so at that point, I moved back to Arizona and thought, well, I know real estate, let's go for it.
That is an incredible story, especially as somebody who has had tons of migraines themselves. I understand, like, once you have one of those, you can never come back from it and it changes your life. So I understand, and that is an incredible story. You also have an incredible story of how you then also transitioned while you were in the business. So let's first start with first days of the firm you were previously at in brokerage. Tell me a little bit more about your experience while you were there.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. Like I worked for a really great firm in Arizona. I kind of say that I grew up there in the business. I learned a ton from amazing people that became my friends. They became my family, and I just learned absolutely a ton and really cut my teeth with that first company.
That is beautiful. Is that how you then got into working with the physicians? Because that is super niche.
It is super niche. Yeah. That was actually, yeah, I guess kind of the tail end of my career at the previous company. I started working with physicians, and that was really just kind of through word of mouth and through some referrals that I ended up working with a couple. And then, of course, if you do a great job, then they tell their friends. And so that is how I ended up really just kind of diving into that niche.
That's incredible. So we have to obviously unpack the story of you pitching Ryan Serhant with an iPad, which when I heard this story, I was so inspired and I was like, she is awesome. Like that is just absolutely incredible. Let's start. How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah. So this was early 2024 that I frankly had kind of found myself in a bit of a funk in the real estate business. I, at that point, was in the business for, gosh, something like 12 years and full time. And I was feeling super stymied by the industry. Like, do I go this way or do I go that way? There's only two choices. That's how I felt, at least. And so I just decided to start looking at some new brokerages in town. I interviewed with everybody, and none of them really had that feeling that I was looking for, like that feeling of home. And so I was just really bummed out about it. And I ended up going on a vacation with one of my best girlfriends, who's now one of my business partners. And she said she had just come from Inman and she heard Ryan speak. And of course, I knew who Ryan was, being in the industry. He is a pillar, he's super successful. And she said to me, Steph, why don't you go work for Ryan Serhant? And I was like, well, obviously, I would love to, but he's not in Arizona. And she said, well, why don't you ask him? And I thought, okay, interesting concepts, right? So I dove into all of his books and podcasts for the rest of that trip. I listened to everything, read everything that I could get my hands on, and basically fell in love with the brokerage at that moment and decided, like, yep, this is exactly what I want. This is what I want for my team. This is what I want for Arizona. This is what I want for the industry. And so then became the question of, well, what am I gonna do? Am I just gonna slide into his DMs and ask him to come to Arizona? Um, and being that I went to business school, being a huge nerd, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write him a pitch. And so I went to work writing this pitch. It ended up being about 10 pages long. And it was like, here's all the reasons why you should come to Arizona, and here's all the reasons why you should do it with me. And then I had this great PDF, and I thought, well, great. Now what am I going to do with it again? Am I going to DM him this PDF? Like, he's so busy. There's no way he ever opens this, right? And so in the summer of 2024, I decided to hire a creative team to film my pitch. And so we filmed the pitch as a video. Um, Meanwhile, all of this is going on, like, he has no idea who I am, right? All of this is happening totally behind the scenes. And we filmed the pitch, it was about 3 minutes long. Then I had this beautiful video. And as pretty much around the time that the video got completed, the show Owning Manhattan came out on Netflix. And I'm not really a big reality TV person. I had no idea that this was coming. And so he went from like being super well known in real estate to being super well known everywhere. And then I'm like, great. Well, now what am I going to do? Third time's the charm, DM him this video? I don't think so. So I had to figure out a creative way to get it to him. So what I ended up doing was buying an iPad. I engraved it to say Serhant Scottsdale, which of course did not exist. And I put the video on the iPad and I FedExed it to his office in New York City.
That is incredible. It's also amazing too to paint the picture for everybody that is listening to this. Once again, this was 2024, right? So this is now a year and a half ago. What then happened so you send the iPad. What comes next?
So I sent the iPad, and he responded pretty much right away. The first email I ever have from Ryan Serhant is in all caps, which I just absolutely love. And it says, wow, you didn't have to send an iPad. To which I thought to myself, well, yes, I did because you looked at it. It worked. Um, but he said in his email, now this, keep in mind, was about September now of 2024. And he said, wow, you didn't have to send an iPad. We have no plans to be in Arizona. But when we do, dot, 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 end of email. Like, shoot, okay, well, it's not a no, but it's also not a yes. And so he copied a guy on the email whose name was Todd. He was the VP of growth at Serhant. I reached out to Todd and I basically said, hey, I want to get to know you. I want to find out how we move Arizona up on the list, how we can make this happen. And so he and I had a chat. He said, hey, Steph, you do a great business, but in order to go into any market, we really have to have X amount of dollars of agents doing production. And I said, okay, got it. And I ended that call by asking him, Todd, if he was going to be in New York City for Ryan's conference later that month. And he said, yeah, why? And I said, well, I bought a ticket. I'm coming to the conference. I'm coming to New York. I would love to meet you and have 30 minutes. And he was like, okay. He was a little skeptical because he thought I was some super fan or something weird. Um, But anyway, I went to New York. I met with Todd and I sat with him. I said, look, we've got like 27 minutes left of the 30 that you've given me. I said, it took me 6 days, but I got you that X amount of number of production plus 10%. And he sent a picture of the piece of paper that I had. He sent a picture of it to Ryan right while I was sitting there. And he said to Ryan, "Are you ready for Arizona?" And uh total goosebump moment. Like get goosebumps now, still thinking about it. And I was obviously inside like screaming and shrieking. And we ended up opening Arizona 6 months later. So we opened in March of this year, 2025, with 70 agents in Arizona.
And how many are you up to now? Just so people also understand that 70 is incredible, but also fast forward to, do you know how many agents you're up to now?
Yeah, so we are at about 92 agents right now, 6 months in. And just got some very cool Q3 stats, but we, as Serhant Arizona, are the 40th brokerage in Arizona in terms of production in 6 months. And in a city, I should say, of Phoenix, where there's 56,000 realtors, we are just beyond stoked with that.
That is amazing. Congratulations, number one. And number two, that is a beautiful story. I mean, even just like the way that you were just so bold and persistent and went after what you want, but in a way that was really creative. Because you could have sat there on that video and said, no, you know what, I'm going to just slide into his DMs. I'm going to keep posting it and tagging it, and found every reason or excuse, or we all come up with them, right, of why we don't want to do it. But you found a creative way. And how amazing to look back. You essentially had this conversation with him a little over a year ago, right? If I'm following the timeline correct. And here you are a year later. What has been the biggest accomplishment from this year? Like, if you look back reflective of, okay, here's year one since I've had that conversation, what is your biggest takeaway from the year?
I love that you asked me that question. And I think like the part of the story that is like in the background of the story, but really truly my biggest takeaway is what was going on in my life at the time and how it's made such a tremendous impact on my life. Um, like the personal side of the story, during all of that craziness, like pitching Ryan Serhant, right? 2024 was probably undoubtedly the hardest year of my life. I was going through a divorce. My dog died the day that I got back from New York, the first time that I met Ryan, and he was like, the dog that like takes half your spirit when he goes to heaven, that kind of dog.
It's a real thing.
And like a couple weeks after that, the sewer line under my house collapsed, and I had to literally tear up the floors of my entire house, like foundation and all. There were like piles of dirt in my house 5 feet tall because it was nuts. Um, and a handful of other things, right? Like I was blowing up my real estate career, um, all on like a whim, all on a hope and a belief that like this thing was going to happen. And there were, some very dark and hard and challenging days. Um, and during all of that, right? Like I had no idea if the Sirhan thing was going to happen. I was hoping and working really hard at it, but I basically like put all this money into the mail and kissed it goodbye, right? And so it's a long-winded way of answering your question, but the thing that's really, really impactful to me is that during that time, it felt like every day was so long and like, what am I doing here? But now I look back and I'm like, it's 10 months, it's 12 months, and look at how you can totally change your life if you just decide that you're going to do it and you take one step towards it every day. Sometimes it's tiny steps, sometimes it's a big step, and frankly, sometimes it's 5 steps backwards. Um, but really, truthfully, like you can change your life. You just have to decide.
That was beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing that, because I know it's a hard story, especially to unpack. And I've seen you share parts of it too on social media, and you had such I'll call it a wild year with so many ups and downs. And I know just that story you're sharing is going to help so many women that are listening to this, that we have so many excuses, right? Of, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to pursue this passion. There's so much change in my life. I can't go for anything else. And so I appreciate you sharing that because I know what a difference it's going to make.
Well, thank you for asking. And I think that's kind of like it's a very cool lesson and something that I honestly feel blessed to be able to have now is like, look, I feel like it's my responsibility to share it, to empower other people. I told my friends a lot of times, like, I don't necessarily know that everything is going to be okay, but I trust my friends and my family who are telling me that it's going to be well enough to know that it's going to be. And so, if I can be that friend to one person that tells you, like, hey, it's going to be okay, keep going, then that's what I want to do.
For that one person that's listening, that's trying to take even that like one tiny step, what was it that you were telling yourself that you would also tell this person in order to start taking those steps?
Mm. I think just having like like a clear picture of what I wanted my life to be. Like I didn't know how I was going to get there and I didn't know what it was going to look like. But I knew that like deep down how I wanted to feel about myself and like what a cool and amazing life I can have. And so, the phrase that's inspiring when you're going through hell, just keep going. I thought about that often in terms of like, okay, there's a vision for my life, and I'm just gonna keep on going until I get there.
Are you a journaler? Are you a dream board person? Like, what is your, I always love to ask people this and know what their way of putting their vision together is.
Oh, I love that. I have started journaling in the last year for sure. I think it's very interesting. It's something that Ryan does quite a bit and coaches on quite a bit, especially when you're feeling really heavy emotions or really something that feels so big and so crazy. He has this great tip that you should go into your calendar 30 days from right now and write down exactly how you feel. And then in 30 days, you get that reminder of how it was feeling. And more often than not, it's going to be not as big, not as scary, not as overwhelming. And that gets us in the practice of showing us like we can do hard things, right? And we can overcome things, overcome challenges, and feelings are for feeling and they'll pass. Um, so I've definitely started doing a lot of that per Ryan's great advice. And I also love a vision board. I mean, there's nothing better than just putting some actual, pictures to it and looking at it every day. It's subconscious most of the time, but I've seen it work a lot.
So, as you are getting ready to do a vision board for 2026, and if so, I'd love a little insight of what is on there for you, and if you're willing to share, even personally and professionally.
Yeah, I love that. So next year I have some aggressive sales goals for myself and my team. So that's definitely going to be on there. It would be like record breaking for personal sales and then team, of course. And we've been doing a lot of really good systems and structure work this year, especially, building up the brand with Serhant that I know we can get there. So that's been really exciting. And besides that, I mean, it's travel for me. Next year, I really want to go to Spain, maybe back to Italy. It's my favorite place ever. And then I'm definitely throwing another investment property on the vision board for next year.
That is awesome. I love it. I love it. And then, especially, too, to see how you are supporting both yourself and your team because it's you took the big step of being this founder for Serhant, and I love that you're not just sitting here saying, "Great, I founded it. See you later. I did what I did. I'm just going to go build my own business now." The fact that you still have that team mentality, I think, is what really makes you stand out. And I noticed, like, even you and I met at a conference, Ryan Serhant's conference in Orlando. You can tell too when we meet in person that you care about those around you. So to see that reflected in your goals and the future, I just think is an amazing thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for recognizing it for sure. And I feel obviously like you and I have that kind of kindred spirit, which is why we hit it off when we met, for sure. But I that was something that was really, really important to me about bringing Serhant to Arizona, just having that spirit of collaboration over competition. Real estate can be very cutthroat. It can be a very lonely business if you don't have friends in it. If you don't have mentors, if you don't have people kind of supporting you and cheering you on. And, realistically, there's enough business for all of us, right? So I don't want to ever be a gatekeeper when it comes to real estate. Um, There's tons and tons of ways to be successful at it. And honestly, like the person who's standing right next to me, their clients probably aren't my same clients anyway, right? You work with people that are attracted to you. Your vibe is your tribe. How do you say that? Tribe is your vibe, whatever, however that goes. Um, and so, so there's no sense in just being competitive all the time.
I agree. And that's something I think that, especially as women, we do differently. So I would also love to hear your experience, and we can end on this note, is how you have really grown, especially real estate can be a very male heavy, male dominated world. And a lot of the women that listen to this are in that world and they are trying to figure out how to make a space for themselves. How do you do that in your own business and also in your own life?
I love that. So I think a couple ways. Like one of the kind of reasons that I was feeling super stymied by the industry when I was feeling that way was like, okay, well, if you want to be in luxury real estate, you have to wear a suit and say, "Welcome to 123 Main Street," and do this video where you're just walking up to the house, right? And it just felt so inauthentic to me. And I think that that's probably my biggest advice to anyone who is feeling stymied by their industry or pigeonholed by their industry, whether it's because of, it being male or female dominated, or whether it's for any other number of reasons. But like the sooner that you can just be fully authentically yourself in your business, you're going to attract the people who are meant for you. And if you're attracting people that are for you, you like them, they like you, business is fun, it's seamless. Not always, right? Problems come up, but you have a much higher likelihood of working through them together. And when you like what you do and when you're having fun with it, you're going to be way more successful. And so Serhant was definitely a platform for me to just go full in on like, hey, this is who I am. I don't always wear a suit. Sometimes I do. When I do, it's pink, right? And like you're going to see me on Instagram with my dog, or, going out to different restaurants, or in my Jeep, right? Like I'm not just this one thing that's a realtor. I'm Stephanie. I also sell real estate. Um, and just kind of giving myself permission to be authentic and be myself is definitely a game changer.
I think that's really what, we talk so much about, okay, what is going to happen with AI and technology and how are we all going to be replaced? And people forget that we're humans, right? And seeing
Yeah.
you in your Jeep and you with your dog and you out having coffee, it may not relate every time to real estate, but when someone sees that, they're like, oh, that's right. Like, Stephanie's a human. Like, she's a good human.
Yeah.
She has a life. And that then creates like boundaries and they respect you. But they also want to work with you because they remember that, oh, right, there's a human behind this that's looking out for me and that cares about me, which is something that AI and tech can never do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'm a huge proponent of AI and tech. I mean, I use ChatGPT and Sora and Speedo and all the things, right? Like, I think it's amazing, and I think you have to. But, I was telling a friend or a team member actually not that long ago, I was in a meeting recently with a family that's going through a really tough time, and they're, going to be selling their house. And she's, the woman is showing me around the property, and I just kind of pulled her aside and I was like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "Nope, not really." And I just like squeezed her hand. And no matter how many like processes and systems and tech and AI and stuff that we have, it's never going to be able to do that, right? It's never going to be able to like squeeze someone's arm or squeeze their hand and tell them it's going to be okay. I mean, sure, it could type that to you. Probably could even say it to you now in Sora, but yeah, I think you really have to remember that there's a human element, and that's where like the most successful people will be who use AI.
That's beautiful. And that is a perfect note to end on. And I like to ask everyone one final question before we end our episode. And that is, what is one thing you do every day that makes you feel wealthy?
Ooh, I love that question, and I wasn't prepared for it.
That's why I love to catch people off guard too, because then I get the honest answer.
Yeah. I think, one thing that makes me feel wealthy is like walking my dog every day. And maybe that's kind of a sillier thing to say, but it's, like I have the time to do it. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and it kind of grounds me and sets me up for success for the rest of my day. So I would say that.
That's awesome. I love it. And I hope you do it with a coffee in hand and enjoy every second of it, especially before Well, fall is not really going to fully hit in Arizona, so it's a little different, but before the winter
Yeah.
starts to kind of hit while you're there. Awesome. Well, Stephanie, if people want to connect with you, talk to you, if they're relocating, especially to the Phoenix area, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
So Instagram is definitely one of the best ways, or my cell phone. I'm sure you can put that maybe in the show notes or whatnot, but my Instagram is just stephanie.bray.az. I'm there all the time, so you can find me there, and I would love to follow you back.
Awesome. And we will be linking all of that in the show notes here and absolutely connect with Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephanie. This was a wonderful conversation and happy holidays, everyone.